Welcome to Bookcast AI Podcast. Today, we're diving into an insightful discussion on Mortimer J. Adler and Charles Van Doren's classic, How to Read a Book. This guide has been invaluable in understanding different levels of reading and mastering active reading techniques. Let's dive right in. How do you think they differentiate between active and passive reading?
That's a fantastic place to start. Adler and Van Doren emphasize that active reading requires effort and skill from the reader, similar to a catcher actively engaging with the pitcher, rather than passively catching what's thrown. They argue that reading is an activity where successful communication happens only when the reader actively engages with the text.
Exactly, and they also mention that reading isn't just about gaining information, but about increasing understanding, which requires more intellectual effort. Would you say this ties into their concept of elevating oneself intellectually while reading?
Yes, indeed. It's about transforming from understanding less to more through active engagement with challenging material. Adler and Van Doren highlight that this intellectual growth is akin to pulling oneself up by the bootstraps. They stress that learning primarily occurs from those better in understanding, and it's our job as readers to identify and learn from these sources.
And this learning is described as aided discovery, right? Where the teacher aids, but the student actively engages in discovering knowledge.
Spot on. They draw a parallel between this and active reading, where the reader learns from an absent teacher, essentially the book itself. It's an exciting process of discovering answers through the text. Now, they also mention 4 levels of reading. Can you expand on that?
Certainly. The 4 levels start with elementary reading, which is about recognizing words and sentences. Then inspectional reading helps grasp what a book is about quickly. Analytical reading involves thorough comprehension, making the book one's own. Lastly, syntopical reading compares multiple books on a subject to construct a broader understanding.
That's a great summary. It's fascinating how each higher level encompasses the lower ones. But it seems there's a gap in education beyond elementary reading. Adler and Van Doren point out that many high school graduates aren't competent readers because formal reading instruction often stops too early. How do you think this impacts students?
That's a crucial point. Without instruction in higher levels of reading, students may struggle with complexity and depth in texts. This gap can hinder their ability to perform analytical or syntopical reading, which are essential for higher education and independent research.
True, and this ties into their discussion on speed reading. They argue that speed reading courses often focus too much on faster reading, rather than varying speed based on the material's complexity. What are your thoughts on their approach to reading speed?
I find it intriguing. They suggest that reading should be flexible, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, depending on what's needed for comprehension. Fixations and regressions can slow us down, but with practice, we can overcome these habits. It's all about finding a balance.
Absolutely. And when it comes to comprehension, it's more than just answering basic questions. It's about understanding complex meanings. They emphasize skimming and superficial reading to assess a book's worth before diving deeper. How do you think this impacts our approach to reading difficult texts?
It's a strategic approach, isn't it? By giving difficult books a quick once-over, we can prepare ourselves for a more thorough reading later. It's about not getting stalled by challenging passages, but focusing on what we can understand initially.
Precisely. And this leads to active reading, where we ask questions, take notes, and interact with the text. Adler and Van Doren suggest marking books, using symbols, and writing reactions to keep us engaged and remember key ideas.
Yes, Making a book our own is a powerful concept. It's about transforming the reading experience through practice, making the rules of reading a second nature. Do you think this emphasis on practice reflects on the complexity of learning to read?
Definitely. They liken it to learning to ski, requiring patience and practice. The multiplicity of rules in reading highlights the complexity of the habit to be formed, not multiple distinct habits. It's a continuous journey of improvement.
Well said. And finally, how do you see the importance of classifying the type of book early in the reading process?
Classifying the book type helps tailor our reading approach, ensuring we apply the right techniques for maximum comprehension. It's a critical step, as failing to do so can lead to inefficiencies in our reading process.
Thank you for such a lively and insightful discussion. Remember, active reading transforms us into better thinkers and learners. Until next time, keep engaging with your books actively and thoughtfully. Goodbye for now.
Goodbye, and happy reading to all our listeners out there.